All right, Akim. Shalom, shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakak Dash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone for teaching us his truth. Salutations to the sincere Akim and Aqua who may listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Okwai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always, Yahweh Ratiza, Yahweh willing, that this lesson may be edifying to those who listen. And for today's lesson, I kind of wanted to react to this clip that I saw on Instagram in regards to a lot of young Israelite boys going missing, right? And it's kind of like disturbing, to listen to some of these things, but it kind of reminded me of the curses, that fell upon us when you read Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, right? So what I want to do, I want to play the clip. It's quite long, but hopefully, this will be an edifying lesson, right? So let me just jump to it real quick.
Disturbing amount of young black males that have gone missing in and around Ontario between October and December of this year. We have Kimani Langley. He's 16 years old, last seen on October 21st in Brampton, Ontario. We have Al Pacino McNaught. He's 25 years old, last seen in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario on October 19th. We have Michael. They did not reveal his last name, but he's 15 years old, and it was published on November 12th that he was last seen in Whitby, Ontario. We have Aiden. He's 15 years old. He was last seen on November 7th in Ajax, Ontario. We have Trey Sean. He's 15 years old. He was last seen on November 17th in Toronto, Ontario. And then we have Malachi, 15 years old, last seen on December 1st in Toronto, Ontario. So that's 6 young black males that have gone missing. And if you've noticed, the ages for the vast majority of them are between 15 and 16 years old. This is a problem. What are the police doing? Where are these young boys? Why are they all missing? And so many in such a short period of time. What's going on here? And what can we do as a community to help? First, we have to make sure that we keep our eyes and ears open. We definitely do everything we can to protect our young brothers. And also, if you've seen anything or heard anything, please, please, please contact your local Toronto or wherever you are in Ontario police station or Crime Stoppers 1-800-222-TIPS, and please report. If you see anything suspicious, if you hear anything suspicious, please, please speak up. This is very, very disturbing, and I can only imagine the angst and the pain that the families of these young brothers are going through, not knowing where they are, not knowing what's happening, what the update is, if there are any updates, what are the police doing. So we as a community have to stand up and do what we can to help bring these boys home. Disturbing amount of young.
All right, so that's pretty much the clip. There were all these boys. Um, Now they're going missing, and they're nowhere to be found. You don't hear any Amber Alerts. You don't hear any. You don't really get much news coverage. I saw like I saw probably about maybe one or two what's it called, uh, news clippings, news headings on it since Friday, but it doesn't get much. Essentially, it doesn't get much press release. It doesn't get much coverage. Status. People are not well aware of what's going on, and it's unfortunate. But this is all also part of the curses, right? So I kind of wanted to start off there, right? And because Jake doesn't understand that um, these things happen to us and continue to happen to us because, we departed from the ways of the Lord, right? So this is Deuteronomy 28. I'll start at verse 15, but I'm just going to jump down and make a couple points here in this chapter. And it says, I'll start at verse 15. So it says, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord Yahweh thy power, to observe to do all his commandments and statutes, which I commanded thee this day, that all these curses shall fall upon thee and overtake thee." Right? So, they have, these boys, they're looking for them. They can't seem to get a lot of resources and attention and essentially, make this situation known, right? If that boy was a so-called white boy or a so-called ish, that would have gotten a lot of press release, a lot of coverage. Like, say for example, if you saw one of like some graffiti or something like that on one of those different schools of these imposters, right? If you saw something like that, there would be a lot of coverage. There would be a lot of attention. You would see a heavy police presence. You see a command post set up. You have all the resources allocated to them. Excuse me. But for us, is Jake doesn't seem to realize that this problem is clearly spiritual, and you're essentially your life is like a vapor, basically. When like, say for example, when you breathe your breath onto a glass pane, and then you see the moisture come up, and then the moisture eventually just starts to fade away. That's your life, Jake. That's that's pretty much our life in this society, right? So let me jump down to verse 41, and it says just bear with me on this 1 second. This is Deuteronomy 28 verse 41, and it says, "Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity." So our people, this is one of the curses that fell upon us as a nation. And I know the news clipping is referring to you so-called Negroes, Latinos, so mostly the so-called Negroes, but that also includes your northern tribes also. That shows that you're also under these curses, because if there's one thing I've noticed in Canada, the only time you really hear about the plight and the affliction of the so-called indigenous people, is always around election time. They always say they're gonna do something about the missing, so-called Aboriginal women. You guys fit these curses also, right? You guys are not immune from these things, right? You're also the Lord's people, right? So I'll just read that again, and it says, "Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity." So, right? So from the understanding from the clipping, I don't know per se what exactly, how they went missing or anything like that, what type of life they lived, but through the norm we can speculate that some of the things that Jake likes to get into and is involved in is that gang culture, that gang life. They're hanging around the wrong people. They want to be a thug. They want to be cool. They want to be a gangster. They want to be, for you, a lot of the women, they want to be whores. They want to be prostitutes. This is the type of life that they want to get into, right? And I remember even growing up, my parents always used to say, watch your friends. Well, show me your friends, and I'll tell you what you're like, right? So Jake doesn't seem to understand that and that's another thing also. Jake doesn't seem to understand that you have enemies, right? Let me go to the book of Baruch. Because part of knowing who you are is also knowing that you have enemies, and Jake is kind of like in that Hakuna Matata spirit, like in that that character in Lion King, right? They're just going along and chilling with the, like when Simba, for example, in the movie, Simba is in that Hakuna Matata spirit, you know, and they're chilling with the hog and they're chilling with the meerkat, and that's the Simba really represents you Israelites, represents Jake, that is running away and doesn't seem to understand that those people you're hanging around are a bunch of heathens, right? This is Baruch chapter 4. I'll start at verse 1, and it says, "This is the book of the commandments of the Most High, and the law that endureth forever. For all they that keep it shall come to life, but such as leave it shall die. Turn thee, O Jacob," so you Israelites, you so-called blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, and you speckled bird Israelites also, "take hold of it and walk in the presence of the light thereof, that thou mayest be illuminated," right? So being part of knowing who you are is also knowing the knowing your enemies are, right? So Jake gets into these different situations, right? Because they don't have an understanding, and they don't understand, one, they're in captivity, and you're mingled amongst heathens, and these heathens don't wish you the best. They don't care for you. They don't like you. They only like you when you're entertaining them. But other than that, they don't like you. They rather see you in a degenerate and destitute state, right? Um, I wanted to get to. As a matter of fact, let me just read verse 6. And it says, "Ye were sold to the nations, not for your destruction, but because you moved the Most High Yahweh, Bashem Hawashai, to wrath, and ye were delivered unto your enemies," right? So this is what's happening today. We're delivered into the hands of our enemies. We're behind enemy lines, and this is what happens. When Jake doesn't walk in the light, in the presence of the light thereof, they get into these different situations. Like I said, I don't fully know what happens with these particular boys that they're speaking of, but when it comes to our people, comes to a lot of our young people, they get into different acts of folly, right? They're essentially they're like the scriptures say, they're princes that sit in a low place, and the servants are essentially ruling over them, right? And they don't consider them, they don't think of and consider these things, that they're princes and why these things are happening. So what do? They run to Esau to try and get, like the scriptures also say, they run down to Egypt for help, right? And think they're going to get some kind of comfort and answers. But these heathens don't give an shit about you, right? So I wanted to also read Jeremiah. Oh, go over here. Because when these things happen to us, these other nations don't care. If it was one of those heathens, especially if it's one of Esau's children, you would see all the press release, all the coverage, night and day, morning to evening. You see, all the resources pulled out. You would see, command posts. You would see a crazy amount of exposure when it comes to identifying and trying to find these one of their children, right? But when it comes to us, your life is just a vapor, right? um, this is Jeremiah 15. I'll start at verse 1, but the point I kind of wanted to hit is really in chapter 5. Um, so it says, then the Lord Yahweh said unto me through Moses, and Samuel stood before me, yet my people could not turn toward this people. Cast them out of my sight, and let them go forth. And it shall come to pass, if they say unto thee, Whither shall we go forth? Then thou shalt tell them, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, such as are for death to death, such as are for the sword to the sword, such as are for famine to the famine, and such as for the captivity to the captivity, right? So just the different judgments that fell upon, our nation. right? And there's judgments that are gonna come and fall upon the majority of our nation, right? So this is verse 3, and it says, "I will appoint over them four kinds, saith the Lord Yahweh: the sword to slay, and then the dogs to tear, and the fowls of the heaven, and the beasts of the earth, and to devour and to destroy. And I will cause them to be removed into all kingdoms of the earth, because of Manasseh the son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for that which he did in Jerusalem." Right. So just for context, like just so you understand, Hezekiah, out of the amount of kings that came out of after Solomon, his kingdoms got split. Hezekiah was an example of one of the righteous kings, but his son, Manasseh, as it's being spoken of here, he starts doing a bunch of folly and wickedness, right? He didn't really follow in the footsteps, excuse me, as his forefather King David and his father Hezekiah, right? So this is kind of just going to show, a lot of our young men and a lot of our young boys, since we're speaking about the Israelite, young people, they get into these different things and different acts of folly, right? And they don't understand that they have a higher power. They don't understand that they're supposed to walk in a particular fashion, and then they get trapped up into these different situations, right? um, just so just so we can get some more clarity on that, hold on, let me just jump across to the book. Just bear with me on this. Let me just jump across to Second Kings. Second. Just bear with me. Just so you can get an idea of what he did, right? So this is 2 Kings 21, verse 1. I'm going to jump down to verse 6, and it says, "Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hephzibah." I'm just going to jump down to verse 6, and it says, "And he made his son to pass through the fire, and observed times, and used enchantments, and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. And he wrought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord, and provoked him to anger," right? So a lot of our people, they provoke the Lord to anger, and they don't even know what they're doing, right? So I just wanted to bring that out for edification, just so you can get an understanding of, what Manasseh actually did, what King Manasseh actually did, right? Despite the fact that his father was righteous, because the scriptures also talk about, it's better to die without children rather than they actually have to have the fear in them, to roughly paraphrase, right? So a lot of these children are just running about, causing havoc and mayhem. The Lord is going to number a lot of them to famine, and a lot of them mock too. That's another thing also. They might come across apostles and prophets and brothers in different camps, and they see them, and they take that opportunity to mock, right? The Lord's going to bring a lot of judgment upon a lot of these young boys, a lot of these young people, right? Scriptures say in Ezekiel 9, "Slay utterly old and young," right? "But come near no man who has the mark," to roughly paraphrase, right? So but the points in 5, I kind of just wanted to hit right here. This is Jeremiah 15:5, and it says, "For who shall pity thee, O Jerusalem? And who shall mourn thee? Who shall go aside and ask how thou doest? Thou hast forsaken me, saith the Lord Yahweh. Thou art gone away backward. Therefore I will stretch out my hand against thee and destroy thee. I am weary with repenting." Right? So this is the examples of judgments that have fall upon our nation as a people, right? Let me just get Deuteronomy because our young people are supposed to have these precepts, to actually conduct themselves in a certain fashion. That's what makes us as a holy people, right? So this is Deuteronomy 6, verse 7, and it says, and these words, I'll start off verse 6, and it says, and these words which I command thee this day, thou shalt be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and thou shalt talk to them when thou sittest in thy house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. Right? So our children are supposed to actually have these precepts, in their minds, so they know how to conduct themselves, right? But you have a bunch of lawless, like the apostles say, GMO babies running around and causing havoc and mayhem, right? And this is the judgments that fall upon them, right? Because Jake doesn't want to essentially look at themselves and look back and turn back to the ways of the Lord, right? So, anyways, I pretty much covered the point. Jake doesn't seem to understand that this condition that they're facing is one example of the many curses that the Lord put upon us as a people, right? So I'm gonna do a part 2 to this, right, to show the importance of, the essentially the Israelite man, right? Because that's something that is very, very poorly valued in this society. That's another idea that came into my mind. But Lord's will, that as always, though, that this lesson was edifying, and just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.